Tanashi, hello. My name is Chasity Cairns. My spirit name is Sa'amaki, which means medicine woman in Blackfoot. I am the new manager of Indigenous engagement and student supports with Medicine Hat College. Today I want to talk about our Indigenous people in our community and moving forward in a good way. First things first, what is Indigenous? There's First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and non-status. We have 634 First Nations communities in Canada, 50 distinct languages, and 50 distinct tribes. From my experience working at Meowsin Friendship Center, supporting the Indigenous community in Medicine Hat, I've noticed over the years that a lot of our population isn't from here. They're from somewhere else. We have a huge Métis population that has history here. And also for First Nations, even though we're on Treaty 7 and Treaty 4 territory, we don't have any reservations very close to Medicine Hat. And so majority of our population aren't from here. They're from somewhere else. So we don't have a lot of natural supports. We're disconnected from our communities. We're disconnected from our culture and disconnected from our families. It's important to know that because I think moving forward, that's why friendship centers were developed, is because to support urban Indigenous. In history, it was very patriarchal. So in documentation, they would state the father's name, but not the mother's name. And so if you're looking for your genealogy, a lot of the times you weren't able to find your Indigenous ancestry because it was written by the male, not the female, but your native ancestry came from the woman. So a lot of the history was lost when you're trying to find who you are, where you're from. Well, every day you're looking in the mirror and you know you're Indigenous, but just with the disconnect as well with the residential school system, children being torn from their families and put in residential schools. Some people, everybody's story is different. For instance, my sister, we have the same dad, and her mom was a residential school survivor, and she came from northern Manitoba, and she went to a residential school in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And so that's like 18, 20 hours away from where she's from. When residential school was done, a lot of these children were put in foster care system, child welfare system, and they had no ties to their family and where they're from. And so a lot of times when you're working for, say, government or Indigenous organization, they'll ask, are you First Nations? Are you Métis? Are you non-status? Are you Inuit? A lot of that is just for us to keep track of who's attending and what type of services can we support with, because we're so diverse. But a lot of the times, because we are today as people, and there's so many children in the child welfare system that they don't have cards. Cards are colonization. That doesn't say who we are as people, First Nations or Métis, by a card. That's a colonized way of looking at a person's identity. And so a lot of times when I was supporting people in the community, I would tell my client, that doesn't say who you are. Who you are is, do you know if you're Cree? Are you Blackfoot? Are you Ojibwe? Are you Métis? Because that's your connection. That's your connection to the land, where you're from. That's the connection to your family's traditions, your protocols, the teachings. Because the cultures are so diverse, our languages are different, protocols on how we do things are different. And so I always try to have clients connect to that or get connected to the community where you're living in, because that's a start. A lot of people move to urban centers for a better life, to get educated, go to school, to have more opportunities. Most people are aware now that the residential school were part of Canada's dark history. Residential schools started in Canada even before Canada was Canada, which means that First Nations people were attending residential schools. Children were being taken away from their homes as an early age of 5 years old from their parents and put into these schools that were to take the Indian out of the child. When you think of our people, we had a rich history, we had a rich culture, we had our own ways of doing things. And our system worked well. We had amazing parenting practices. We had our own ways of healing with traditional medicines. That's actually proven today by scientific research of how our medicines can heal and our ceremonies that we participate in. So the last residential school was closed in 1996 in Saskatchewan. That's not that long ago. I graduated from high school in 1997. That's my generation. There's people that have attended residential school. So this is still fresh for a lot of people. But saying that, I think it's important to note that there's 7 generations of families that went to residential school. And what does that mean over time for that person? From what I've seen in the community, there is a huge disconnect from their identity because you were beaten in residential school if you spoke your language. Imagine being a little child only knowing how to speak your Cree language, and because every time you speak your Cree language you would get beaten or horrible things were done to you because of that's the only language you know. A lot of atrocities happened, a lot of different types of abuses happened. Intergenerationally, what effects had that played out on our families? A lot. Left in grief, loss. I sat down with an elder from back home. He was from Saugeen First Nations near Winnipeg. He talked about their residential school. It was like a jail. There was a fence all the way around their residential school, so their family members weren't able to go and get their children. So every day you're walking by that fence and you know your babies are in there. And because 7 generations of families that went, most likely you knew what your child was going through. And so think about communities that had no children. Children are a huge part of family role, and not having your child there, what would you do? Children are our lifeline as a parent, and it was against the law if your child didn't go to residential school. There's a lot of loss, grief, and trauma that happened, and over time, over generations, in 1960s, the child welfare system, social workers, they went to Indigenous or First Nations communities and took children away because they thought their parents weren't well enough to take care of their children. So they took their children, they put them in non-Indigenous homes. They posted their pictures like you were selling an animal on a newspaper. This children plays well with whatever, and there was actual documents and newspaper clippings that actually show fact that this happened, and especially in Saskatchewan. So a lot of these children were put in non-Indigenous homes. They grew up without their culture. They grew up without knowing who they were, where they're from. I'm a Cree woman, I'm a Blackfoot man, or who are my mom, who are my dad, or who are my siblings. And then as an adult, identity is a huge part of who you are. And when you're disconnected from who you are, you're lost because there's a piece of you that's missing. And so a lot of loss, a lot of grief, and traumas that happened. Over time, the child welfare system, still today, if you look at children's services stats, 65% of the foster care system are Indigenous children. So what does that say for us as people moving forward? We need to make big changes in our systems, whether it's child welfare systems, more support for Indigenous people. Honorable Murray Sinclair, he was head of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He stated that residential schools hasn't gone away. The new monster is in the child welfare system. Saying that because the same effects are happening to the children as they did in the residential school. Children are being disconnected from their families. They're not having ties to their cultural way of life, their languages. To me, that's scary. We need to try to bring back our culture because that's our healing. That's our connection to identity, to who we are as Indigenous people. And then it's also connection to finding out where we're from. That's so important because that says what to learn. Are you Cree? Because Cree has their own ways of knowing. Blackfoot has their own ways of knowing, even down to their teepees. Their teepees are different on how they're set up, and there's different values and traditions and protocol to setting up a teepee. And there are traditional foods that you eat, how you dance, your language. It's not about getting your card, but it's about finding out your community, where you're from, and being connected to the land where you're from. Moving forward in a good way, we have a document to help guide us to do that, and that's the Truth and Reconciliation Call to Actions. This was a result of findings of residential school survivors' stories, recommendations, and elders also guidance on what do we need in Canada so that, we could move forward in a good way. And depending on what area you're working in education, whether you work for the justice system or you work for the social services, there's areas for everything. That's a good start, is looking at the call to actions. How can you make action to reconciliation? reconciliACTION. It's not about, okay, I'm gonna say something, I'm gonna make change for the organization I work for or to support Indigenous people in your organization, but it's actually doing something, putting action to those words and making changes in how you do things to create a more inclusive environment. Is there a space where First Nations people can smudge? That's our mental health. That's our cleansing, helping us feel better as a person. Generally, you would have a smudge kit. In that smudge kit, you would have an abalone shell or a little cast iron pan, and you would have traditional medicine. Generally around this territory, it's sage or sweetgrass. Then you'd light it up and it would bring up a smoke. And the smoke is your connection to the Creator because it's traditional medicines. And so you would take that smoke and then with your hands, and then you put it over your head, and then all of your body parts, your mouth, your ears, your body, and your heart. That medicine that you just put on all of the body parts cleanses your body, and so that you can walk forward in a good way. How do we create an inclusive environment for Indigenous people? Create a safe environment for them. So, for instance, at the college, we have a new Indigenous center that's being built. And so for me, being the manager of that new center and knowing our population and our community, we're from somewhere else, the first thing that I want to do is create a safe space that they can feel at home, like a home away from home. So having Indigenous items in the space that's diverse, knowing the diversity of our people, and then also respecting the people that the land that we're on is also important. And then also creating an environment so that it's inclusive for all, not just First Nations or not just Métis or Inuit, and having inclusive of all people. And nobody fits in a box. We're diverse. If there's an Indigenous person that you're supporting and you want to offer a referral, where do I go? Or say you want to know more about Indigenous culture, we have Meowsin Friendship Center. They support Indigenous population for various of things with housing, with counseling, with youth groups. They have parent caregiver groups, seniors. If you need support with applying for your Métis card, applying for your status card or anything like that, they have Commissioner of Oath there. And so a lot of times people would have to pay money to get a Commissioner of Oath to apply for cards or say court papers or anything like that, and you can go there and get that done for free. We also have SAMIS Employment and Training. Say you want to go to school. SAMIS Employment, they support with funding for education. Say you want to come to the college, or you can also come to our new Indigenous support office at Medicine Hat College. If you're looking for Indigenous specific mental health supports, I would connect with Meossin Friendship Center. They have a few staff that specialize in Indigenous ways of knowing, Indigenous ways of helping. They also have a calendar they post on their Facebook site. On that calendar will say what sharing circles that's available, what type of classes that support with trauma, loss, and grief. And also I would suggest connecting to an elder, connecting to ceremony. I feel like that's what we need to get back, learning about our culture. I used to host crafting circles, and sometimes as you're beading, your head's down and we're talking and we're connecting, and next thing you know, we're crying. It was such a beautiful thing and beautiful way of releasing emotions, but also we're learning something that we've never known before and we always wanted to, but also connecting to our culture. The truth of the matter is, with Truth and Reconciliation, can't do it alone. We need support. People to support us in events that we're putting on in community, just to learn. I always say there's no stupid question. And a lot of people are scared to ask questions, and I feel like asking a question shows respect. You're not sure, then you're just not going to do with an assumption. And just being aware that a lot of people have taken cultural awareness training or things like that. And I always kept in my mind and my heart that I get to work with elders every day, and an elder once told me, we're still learning every day, because I haven't been in this day. We're going to experience something different, and keeping that in mind, that we don't know everything, even about our own culture, because it takes so much, there's so much to learn, and keeping an open mind and an open heart, that will go a long way when we can learn from each other. And I feel like that's so important for reconciliACTION. It's not just our way, because in reality, we live in a Western world today, but we know we have our own Indigenous ways of knowing, and we need to kind of intertwine those together so that we can move forward in a good way and learn from each other. Sometimes the truth hurts, but if we don't have truth, then how can we move forward? We need those truths, that uncomfortable feelings, and then to find out what do we need to do to move forward, to make things better. So consulting with the people of the land is a good way to start. Asking, how do I ask an elder? I think that's an important thing. Knowing what is protocol for Blackfoot, for Cree, for Métis, for if you ever want them to come and provide education to your organization, or even if you want as an individual. Keeping an open heart and open mind is a good start.